Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. My name is Keith. Today is October 25th, 2021, and in this video we'll be going over a overall market update. We'll be looking at crypto, we'll be looking at the US equity market, we'll be looking at US bonds, the US dollar, a whole bunch of stuff, but in order we'll be looking at Bitcoin from a large time frame to a small time frame. We'll be going over the Bitcoin dominance chart which has been dropping quite substantially. We'll be taking a look at Plan B's 135K call by the end of this year and see what he's been calling throughout this kind of fall to winter time. We'll also look at some S&P, like I did say, the VIX, NASDAQ. We'll also take a look at Tesla, which has been absolutely pumping, especially today. And we'll be ending it off looking at US bonds and the US dollar, as well as the bond yields. So thank you very much for tuning in, and let's jump right into it. The first thing we're going to be looking at is Bitcoin, which is in the top right-hand corner here. Let's open this guy up. We've just been on a monumental push to the upside here, and we'll just take a zoom back out to the daily chart. We did break that all-time high. Let's just wipe everything off of the screen here. And we already gave you price targets for 70K as well as 80K due to the key geometric targets that we were able to get in terms of the size of the structure we're breaking out of. We're basically just using geometry and extrapolating the size of the impulsive pushes that we saw at the start, at the creation of the structure that we broke out of, in order to get the potential targets that we're looking at, as well as using psychological numbers, as well as fib extensions. So we try to look for as many confirmations as possible. But in short, we're looking at the 70K zone as well as the 80K zone for the next key levels of resistance for Bitcoin. But until then, we do think that this bull run is going to continue and going to get more aggressive, more parabolic, and more buy pressure is going to be coming for the later half or the later duration of this Q4 here. So in my opinion, we're going to be breaking all-time highs, continuing on 70K first level of resistance, and then you got the 80K level of resistance, which is going to be right around there. So on a large time frame, it looks absolutely phenomenal. We'll be taking a look at a smaller time frame to see what we're able to discover when we're just looking at this pullback here. But when you're looking at this major zone, what I see currently, let's just take a quick snip here, looking at the previous structures. I see two previous potential head and shoulders that did not play out. You see this one right here with the neckline being around 30K, and you see the next one here being at right around, I think it's actually up here. It's around 60K right here on a very small time frame. We'll take a look at that. And both of them got invalidated. This was the invalidation point for the first head and shoulders, and then we see the second invalidation point, which we'll get into on a smaller time frame. We're seeing similar sort of structures where you get potential reversals. This is the first reversal. This is the massive head and shoulders that was squeezing the price right up against that 30K zone, and this is another reversal right at the previous all-time high there. And I do not think we're going to be creating a double top or anything. I think we will be extending and pushing this initial impulsive move higher. We'll be getting some sort of structure probably around 70K. I don't exactly know, and then we'll be taking another leg up. So that's my speculation for the foreseeable future, and we'll take a look at a smaller time frame, bringing up the technical analysis that I've done on this small time frame here. I have a different chart for larger time frames, but because I always talk about them, I thought on this one I just keep it really simple. All right, so what we're currently seeing right now, let's just go on to a really small time frame here. This green dotted line is the previous all-time high at around 64.8K, and we just surpassed it, pulled right back, and it was from the high to the low around 10%. We were calling this around 60K zone to be the bottom, and you can see on a smaller time frame the head and shoulders that we can see right here. So I'll do another print screen and just talk about this a little bit more. This was the big head and shoulders that a lot of people were talking about, and then you saw the price grind up against that 60K zone, very similar to what we saw at the 30K zone back in a larger time frame back in summer, and we were able to get a squeeze here. I do see a descending zone there, and the price was able to get the first wave, second wave, and then third wave, and then you got the push pullback, and now you're getting the first impulsive push out of that structure. And we do see a little bit of hesitation from the bills initially. I was kind of worried that we were going to be seeing, if it started to fall back into the wedge, I would have had to rethink my current outlook in the markets. But as of right now, It looks very strong, and I'm expecting this previous resistance turn to support to hold, as we can see, at around that 62-ish K. I think there's going to be a lot of buy pressure, and it looks like we are squeezing right now in a well-structured descending wedge for our next leg higher to break that previous all-time high. And our first target is going to be at around here, around 67K, and our second target is going to be around 70K, and I think that's where we're going to have a little bit of hesitation here. But from where we are currently right now, about to break out of the structure to around 70K, I think it's going to be a pretty clear shot for this next strong bullish push that we're currently seeing. And I'll go into more detail as to why I think there's going to be a long, strong bullish push, not only from looking at the crypto markets, but also looking at the equities and the US bonds. Everything is pointing to a risk-off environment for the next couple of months here, and the speculation, in my view, is we're betting heavy on Bitcoin and especially alts, especially alts, where we're going to see strong accumulation of smaller, more speculative altcoins, and that's definitely a good thing if you are carrying your bags throughout the summer like I have. All right, so going to a smaller time frame here, we'll look at this small little push. Like I did talk about, first target around 60, let's say 66.9 would be just to get to that previous high. You have a first main target around 70K, and then the next main target at around 80, which would be quite a bit up here. So I think there will be some continuation patterns to go, but the next main target is going to be around 70K, which is, I guess, right around there. Just at that, oh, that's not the one, around right here, the fib extension here. The fib extension here is a little bit lower, but overall you're looking at kind of this zone right around here for the next key level of resistance. And looking at the smaller time frame here, I think we are going to see that next push to the upside. This is a nice contraction. Let's go to a smaller time frame on the 30-minute chart, and you see a nice series of slightly lower lows, and you see a little bit more aggressive descending zone, and we can just connect the the lower lows and the lower highs like so, cleaning up a little bit, and you got your nice structure. We'll create a midpoint, we can see just like so, and then let's make it a little bit bigger. And what we're looking for is, we currently have two waves in our wedge. We'll be looking for a third one. So we got our first one, we got our second one. I think we're going to get our third one. We could set up very nicely with a symmetrical triangle within the descending wedge formation that we already currently see, and then get a nice pop, and then we'll get some sort of key zone of confluence where you get a horizontal zone and a descending zone. This whole kind of pie area right here is going to be the zone of confluence. Once we break out of this pie area, or this pizza area, whatever you want to call it, this is the area where we're going to start to see some buy pressure come into the market, and there's going to be bulls that are going to be pushing the price higher, in my personal view. So it's coming. Please be patient for the people that are screaming from the top of the roof that Bitcoin's not at all-time highs yet. Why is that the case? Why haven't we broke higher? It's winding up for that move. So let's now move on to the Bitcoin dominance chart. Let's actually keep this on the 1 hour. I don't usually like to go to a smaller time frame than the 1 hour here. So on the Bitcoin dominance chart, we called the top of the BTC.D chart on around October 19th, October 20th, and we've been seeing a strong push to the downside since. We've already broken below this mid splitter, as we can see. This is connecting the aggressively higher highs and the a lot less aggressive higher lows that we've been seeing within this expanding formation, expanding the volatility, and we're now seeing the pullback here. And I think once we start to crack back down into the 43s, especially if it goes into the 42s, that's basically going to be game over for the BTC.D chart. And once it moves, it really moves. And this second half of this bull market is going to be not so Bitcoin heavy to start, in my opinion. Bitcoin led the rally for quite a ways in our first half of this bull market. I think because we're already in a bull market, there's going to be more incentive for people to assume that their favorite alt is going to increase as well, which then would make them put more money into that alt, which accumulatively, which is going to drive up prices for these different alts. And I think there will be a quicker movement from the alts after Bitcoin is starting to run, which we're seeing already right now. So we're seeing Ethereum obviously run up higher. We already talked about a lot of the things that are doing really well in our Discord. Solana hit all-time highs. just going to get a quick drink of water, and then move on to the next chart. Not a whole lot more that we're going to be touching on for the BTC.D. We already saw that massive capitulation event that happened from 60% all the way to around 40%. I think it won't be as aggressive because Bitcoin will be moving to the upside, but I do think we're going to get a similar sort of structure where we're just going to basically get a massive capitulation for the Bitcoin dominance relative to the other altcoins that are appreciating at a much greater rate. All right, so this is going to be Plan B's calls that he's had so far, and let's just call this to be the present day that we're in right now. At the 32K mark, when we were just holding that 30K zone that we were talking about for the head and shoulders, he was calling for 48K in August, and that was a pretty promising call because we had to break not only this descending zone that was connecting the lower highs, but we also had to break this zone. That was a monumental level of resistance, but we were able to break it, so definitely that was a fantastic call. He said that we were going to pull back to around 42K. You can see 42K is right around there. It did make a low of 40K, but, I'd definitely give it to him. That's a really solid call. And then he said that we would close off the month of October at 64K high, or it hit a 64K high, and we've already seen that. It broke the previous high, so his calls have been pretty phenomenal. He does use his own tools and his own instruments in order to gauge the market. Some of them are technical analysis. Some of them are using his stock to flow model. Definitely, if you haven't watched the TikTok that we recently posted, kind of goes over what he is looking at, but then from his perspective. But just to give a overview of what his thoughts are for the next 2 months, he thinks in November we'll be hitting around 98K, and in December we'll be hitting at around 135K. So definitely he is looking for Bitcoin to be very bullish for this next couple months. I definitely agree with him, and there's a couple of reasons why. We'll take a look at the stock market that just absolutely exploded to new all-time highs. We'll take a look at some other risk-on assets like Tesla or the NASDAQ that's setting up beautifully, or Tesla just mooning to the upside. We'll take a look at all that, but first just wanted to go over Plan B's thoughts as well. Really knowledgeable individual. If you don't know, definitely follow him on Twitter. He created the stock to flow model, which is what a lot of people live by in terms of the market cycles. All right, so we're going to be moving on to a different asset class altogether here. Let's just keep this Bitcoin chart right there. We'll now be taking a look at the S&P 500. We'll be taking a look at the VIX, NASDAQ really quickly, and then we'll be diving into the chart of Tesla, which is just basically parabolic at this point. So we did break that previous all-time high, similar to what we saw on Bitcoin. We've already seen that strong push to the upside, and if you're taking a look at a larger time frame here, we had a nice descending structure with a series of lower lows and lower highs, and then we saw a symmetrical triangle that squeezed from around the start of October, and it broke out around 2 weeks after the start of the structure on October around 14th, and from then the S&P has moved around 3.7%. Doesn't seem like a lot compared to Bitcoin, but is still a substantial move when you're looking at the overall S&P market cap. So from here, our target for this structure is at 4612. So in my opinion, we're just going to be continuing until 4612, which then we would look at either looking for extensions, which would be 4740, and then the 4940, which is that main target, looking at the structure we can see right here, as well as the large expanding wedge that we broke out of from like 2019 all the way to basically late 2020 that we were in. That's that main target that is in confluence with the last extension of this structure. So the final zone for the S&P that I think we could get to for the end of the year, because I think all risk-on assets will be doing well, is around 49.40. We could hit $5,000 for the S&P. I wouldn't be too surprised, just because we're doing so well in terms of risk-on assets right now, and especially coming into the most bullish time of the year. I do expect risk-on assets like the S&P, like the NASDAQ, like things like Tesla or Amazon or Netflix to be doing really well. So that's going to be my view of the S&P on a larger time frame, on a smaller time frame. We just broke that all-time high. Wouldn't be surprised if we get a slight pullback, but the overall trend, in my view, is to the upside. So S&P is looking phenomenal for the the volatility index, the VIX, is looking phenomenal for the S&P to move to the upside. We're seeing decreasing volatility. You're seeing a break of the higher lows that was squeezing the volatility and contracting it slightly together, but we saw a break and invalidation of that ascending zone. So we're probably going to see a nice little tread to the downside where the S&P is able to further its momentum to the upside to our first main target, which is around 46.11. NASDAQ is looking solid as well. We did have a similar sort of head and structures formation that had a little bit more of a deeper dip than we'd like, but we were able to get that recovery. And once we broke that zone of confluence around 15K, we saw a strong push to the upside. It's consolidating now at the previous right shoulder, but it's setting up really beautifully for that next strong push to the upside. And for the NASDAQ, around 16.6K is going to be the target. So we got a lot of room to go before we see some hesitancy from the overall market, in my view, for the NASDAQ. And then the final target, but is less confluence. I'd be looking for some sort of structure that would appear here, which would give me a little bit more confidence for this target around, let's say 17.6K. So that's something to look at a little bit in the future. But right now, NASDAQ looks solid. We see that the previous key level of resistance is now acting as a new level of support. So looking very strong. I am expecting things to be doing well for the overall market here. And taking a quick look at Tesla, just absolutely mooning, hitting all-time highs. And you can see a nice structure that we've been able to hold here. We can either draw a descending zone like so, or you could draw a slightly ascending zone connecting the higher lows. Either way, we would draw that, and then we would go to the breakout, which would be right here. Beautifully done breakout here, where you get a strong ascending zone to initially crack the resistance, and you get a descending zone to squeeze the price to form a higher high, and then you get that nice ascending wedge to then squeeze the price higher. So the first target we just hit today, which is around around $1,020. And then if we add our fib extensions, because we do think that it will continue on, first target is going to be for the extension, the 12.6. Second target is going to be around 16.5K, or around $1,650, right around there. So that's our two targets. We basically already hit the first target, but because we're in a massively risk-on environment, I think we will see a continuation. And obviously, we saw some earnings, and that's why we saw that big pop there. But overall, momentum looks very strong, and risk-on assets are going to continue, in my view. And this is just a good, overall presentation of what I think the overall risk on sentiment is. Looking at S&P, looking at other indexes like the NASDAQ is phenomenal, but when you see Tesla hit all-time highs like this, probably a good idea to look for risk on exposure. So that's going to be my view. Let's just quickly go back to the NDX and open the S&P, and we'll end off this video looking at the US dollar and US bond prices, as well as US bond yields. So quick look at the US dollar here. We're at a key level of support at around 93.5. This ascending wedge has a main squeeze occurring. If we just take a quick screen share, it's basically setting up pretty beautifully for a double bottom, which is not phenomenal, but you see a nice double bottom there, and then you're getting a squeeze up. If you're able to get a squeeze and then a break, where you're getting a squeeze from this zone right here, and then you're able to get a squeeze from this zone right here. If this starts to crack to the upside, it's probably going to be continuing to the upside. I'm not going to be bearish Bitcoin if the US dollar is moving to the upside. We have had times where the US dollar and Bitcoin has been moving to the upside at the same time, but then you're looking at the DXY, which is basically just the US dollar compared to other fiat currencies, which could be depreciating and devaluing more than the US dollar, but the US dollar is still devaluating. So it's going to be a little bit harder if we are going to be seeing a strengthening dollar for Bitcoin, for the metals, for the like stocks, indexes, because everything is compared to the dollar, and if the dollar is moving up, it's going to be harder for things to appreciate, but the dollar doesn't move that much. So in crypto, you're not really going to see a whole lot of change in my view, especially if you're playing in the world of alts. So if you don't know already, definitely look up Brent Johnson's dollar milkshake theory, because there is a theory that basically allows the dollar to move higher and appreciate relative to other fiat currencies while we're seeing other risk on assets do well as well, which would be, for example, the S&P 500. We would see oil do well while we're seeing the dollar do well. Usually they're negatively correlated. Oil is a risk on asset and the dollar is a risk off asset, but we could see them both do well because of the dollar milkshake theory. So I do think that we shouldn't be 100% needing to have the dollar move for the downside in order for us to validate that Bitcoin and the overall cryptocurrency market will be doing well. Something that I will need to see occur is the bond market continuing to show us that risk on sentiment is continuing to trek on here for the rest of this year. This is the value of the bonds. We're going to be taking a look at the yields of the bonds a little bit later on, but the value of the bonds, we saw there was a long correction, a long consolidation, and we're coming back because we saw a major push to the downside. This was the COVID crash where the only real things that did really well were bonds and the US dollar. Japanese yen really risk off investments or trades or asset classes. And then you saw after that S&P did really well, crypto did really well. You see all these risk on assets do really well, and you're seeing an absolute capitulation of the bond value for the 20-year treasury bond here. And we saw a little bit of a dip here. This is when the S&P kind of plummeted. This is when crypto really pulled back from around mid 60s all the way to 30K back in, like, let's say May. We can see there's a very negative correlation between the bond values and Bitcoin. So you're wanting to see the bond values move to the downside when you see crypto do well. And in my view, it is setting up beautifully for the continuation to the downside for the bond values for the 20-year treasury bond here. And we saw a consolidation, we saw a break, retest, and we are now, in my view, seeing a lower high come in, and then we're going to be seeing a slightly descending zone there. Another option is it might be a little bit longer to set up, but we could be seeing, whoa, let's just change that. We could be seeing a structure similar to this, like an ascending zone, and then we'll get a little bit of play here for the US bonds, and then we'll get our next dump down to come to these lows as we can see right here. So there's a couple of options here, but the overall direction, in my view, for the bond values is to the downside. And the last chart we'll be taking a look at in this video is the US bond yields. It's the same time frame, the 20-year government bond yields, and what we're looking for the yields is for the yields to move up. There's a direct negative correlation between the bond value and the bond yields. And the reason why you're wanting to see the bond yields move higher is investors are demanding more yield because there is higher inflation. And when there's higher inflation, that is good for Bitcoin, that is good for real estate, that is really good if you're in the world of blockchain and digital money, basically, in my personal view. So we're wanting to see the yields move higher, which is an indication for inflation. If you're in the stock market, you don't want too much inflation, but if Bitcoin and the rest of the cryptocurrency market get pooled into the basically safe havens in case of inflation pool, that would be phenomenal because they're going to get the risk on sentiment as well as the inflation trade, which I think will persist here for the next coming at least months, if not potential years. So it will be definitely interesting, but I think for this upcoming 2 months here, it will be looking very phenomenal. And the overall market, when you're looking at stocks, when you're looking at bonds, when you're looking at, we didn't talk about it in this one, but when you're looking at FX, when you're looking at what currencies are doing well, you want to see the Australian dollar, the New Zealand dollar, Canadian dollar do really well. You're wanting to see the Japanese yen do really poorly or relatively weak compared to these risk-on assets, as well as the US dollar, which is a risk-off currency. So these are the things that we're looking for from a global macro standpoint in order to better understand the risk sentiment of the world. And in our opinion right now, the risk sentiment of the world is looking for longs on risk on assets, and crypto, especially speculative crypto, is a really good place to be right now. I think Bitcoin is always a safe bet. Ethereum will be doing phenomenal in the next 2 months here. Solana, I think a lot of things coming in, like the layer 2 of Solana, looking at Serum, I think is phenomenal. It's setting up nicely at that around $7 base range. I've been slowly accumulating there. It's looking like a phenomenal entry there. A lot of things we are talking about within our Discord. So if you do enjoy talking about crypto, if you're interested in it, if you want to know more, definitely check it out. You can find the link for our Discord in the description below. And if you did find this video useful, entertaining, informative, it would mean a lot if you do give it a thumbs up and subscribe so we know that we should continue making more videos like this. So thank you very much for tuning in, everyone, and until next time, have a good one.